Welcome to Measuring Success Right, the official student-led podcast of the Marriott Student Review, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
I'm Taia Hobson, and I'm here with Melissa Larson, a professor here at BYU. How are you doing?
Great, thanks.
We're so lucky to have you on today's episode. So give us some of your background, maybe some of how you got started at BYU and other areas of your life.
Yeah, so I would maybe first start by saying I'm a first-generation college student, and I always wanted to go to school, and so I actually didn't start my education here at BYU. I started at SUU, and then I met my husband, and he wanted to go to BYU, so we ended up transferring here. I had no idea that their accounting school was like one of the top in the country, so I was really intimidated right off the bat. But I was here, and so I kind of did the best with what I could. Finished my undergrad and graduate work here at BYU. Along with my husband, we both graduated in accounting. I got our CPA licenses together, then went into practice. And after being into practice a couple years, BYU asked me to come back and teach a class. And I never thought I would teach accounting, and that's kind of where I started, and I fell in love with it, and I've been here ever since.
So going back to that, you're a first college student, generational college student. What was that experience like? How did your parents feel about you going to college? Were they supportive?
Yeah, they were really supportive. I mean, they didn't have the financial resources to be we're able to pay for your education, but they were certainly supportive if that's something I wanted to do. But I will say I felt every semester I was behind. Like I was trying to navigate what classes am I supposed to take next? And I felt like everybody around me already had internships or already knew the language of business. And my parents are hard workers and had careers, but I didn't have necessarily a mentor in college. I think I'm sensitive to that with students because oftentimes we stand up in a class and some people have a background of, they had parents that were in accounting or people that did this, and they speak a language that I didn't speak. And so one, I'm mindful of that as a faculty member, but two, as a student, I had to just be willing to ask, be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Because I know being a BYU student myself, my mom has been to school, my dad's been to school. My mom taught me to read a syllabus from the time I was 12, partly because when she went to school, she came from a pretty poor school area. So nobody ever talked to them about going to college because for most of the kids, it wasn't an option. So no one had ever told her, most of the time there is material you need to know before even the first day.
Yeah.
And so mad respect to getting through college on your, basically without, a lifeline.
I will say it created a sense of gratitude too, though, in terms of some of my peers I would look at and be like, do you even appreciate this opportunity? My family was sacrificing, I was sacrificing a lot, but I loved it. I was going to make the most of every opportunity I could.
That's awesome. So what went from, what were you doing as a CPA and then that transition over, what happened during that transition over to BYU?
Yeah, so I was, when I was a graduate student, I had a faculty member ask me if I would teach Accounting 310 during the summer. I was like, what do you mean? Students can teach that? And he said, I think you'd be a really good teacher. Would you be willing to teach it? Feeling insecure about myself and unsure, but also having experiences of just kind of leaning in a little bit more. And I said, I'll do it. I'll give it my best shot. And I did it, and I loved it. I really loved it. And so after the fact, the faculty member said, have you ever thought of teaching? And I said, never. I've never thought of it. And he said, well, you should consider it. I think you'd be really good in teaching. And I said, well, what would that look like? I mean, I'm about to graduate with my master's degree and start in a professional field. And I said, what would that mean? He said, you need to go get a PhD. And I said, I don't even know what that is. I didn't even know what a PhD was. So I said, what is that? And he said, well, it's 4 or 5 more years of school. And I said, I'm out. I felt like a hero for getting a master's degree. I went above my goal of getting into university and getting a graduate degree. And so I said, and I was expecting my first. So I said, no, I'm going to go into practice. I can't do it. And he said, okay. He said, but I think you still should consider it. And he said, I want you to, you don't get anywhere without great mentors. The faculty saw way more in me before I did. And he just said, I'm going to give you a list of department chairs. He said, you're staying in the state of
Wow.
Utah. He said, I want you to reach out to all of them, and I want you to tell them you're going to teach adjunct for them. You'd like to teach adjunct and teach. He goes, I think you need to get some experience. You might be good at this. Well, I went into practice, got my CPA license, had my first baby, and his thoughts kept coming in my mind. And so I reached out to some schools, and they said, oh yeah, why don't you teach adjunct here? And so I taught like a night class when my husband could be home with the kids, and I really loved it. And then BYU asked me to come teach. I remember I was intimidated by that. And they said, we want you to come teach adjunct in our junior core. I was nervous about that. I was like, look, I was a good student. I wasn't the top student at BYU, and I was fairly young. But I just told the faculty member, the department chair that called me, was the confidence he had. I said, look, you'll get my best. I don't know if my best is good enough, but it's not going to be from the lack of getting my very best. I loved it, and I taught adjunct for 10 years, eventually rolled into a full-time position. And it wasn't until I was in my full-time position, had kind of, got CFS is what we refer to it as, kind of established as a professional faculty member, kind of like, okay, now what are you going to do? When I had the thought, oh, you should go get a PhD. And that shocked me. I was like, well, why would I have that thought? Like, I'm already, and in fact, I remember mentioning it to a good friend and colleague of mine. I said, I think I might need to get a PhD. And he said, why? Why do you say that? He's like, people go get a PhD to get the job that you have. Yeah. And you've been doing it for like 12 years now.
Yeah.
And I said, I know. But I thought I'm not going to move my family. And then I thought, well, maybe it's for my kids to see me do something hard, to see them do something different. And so I remember sitting in my office at BYU when the strong prompting came, your PhD doesn't need to be in accounting, because that's all I'd known. And I was like, and I wasn't too excited about more accounting. And that thought came so strong. And I remember searching like, well, I would stay here in Utah. So what would that look like in Utah? So I just Google searched, what's a PhD in Utah, and BYU pops up. I had no idea BYU had PhD programs, but the very top one that popped up was instructional psychology and technology, which was the science of learning and using technology to leverage students' learning. And when I read that, I thought, now that's something I can get behind, something that could really help my students, help me find better ways to help them be more successful and use technology to leverage it. So I got that. I still did like most of us do. We get promptings. I did nothing for about 6 months, terrified.
Yeah, with the thought reoccurring.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then I finally said it out loud, kind of even to my husband, like, what do you think if I get a PhD? And his response was, I was just waiting. Like, it was just a matter of time. I always knew you would. He knew I loved learning. And he said, I think that's great. And so social sciences, psychology, no background. I studied for the GRE. My son studied for the ACT at the same time. And he'd say, oh, I hate this. I was like, me too. But it's not going away. So we got to sit down every day and do a little bit. And studied for the GRE, got accepted, started the program, did about a year of outside my element. In fact, lots of students clearly had psychology backgrounds because they would talk about people like I should know them. Again, at this point, I was comfortable at being on the outside, like being the new one, being the unsure one. So I'd just write it down and then have to look all this up after class, like who is this individual? What does this mean? What's this research? Anyway, so I studied for a year, kind of, this was new to me, but blended learning and online learning, and studied all the research for it for about a year. And then COVID hit. I remember waking up and I was like, it's no problem. I know exactly how to move this class online. I've just been studying best practices. And that kind of became the start of redesigning Accounting 200 and rebooting it and finding better ways to engage students in large enrollment classes to help them. So.
Well, that's like fascinating how you were like almost like perfectly positioned to like step into this, uncharted waters of like tech and everything had to move online. And so like that, like you were very perfectly like,
I immediately felt I had been guided, but I also immediately felt like I should have started 6 months ago. Could have had 6 months more information, but I learned a ton. And that's what my research has been focused on now, has just been interventions to improve student success.
Okay. So I wanted to back up just a little bit, because earlier you were talking about how, like, as a student coming to BYU and starting everything, you didn't have a ton of confidence. But like now you like walked in the room, like you like just have this like power confidence around you. And so like I want to hear like, is there a point, I don't know, any experiences you had like throughout, you know, like education or just like in life as a mom and everything that has kind of built this confidence in you? Because when you walked through the door, you're like, I don't know, you're like this power woman.
It's the blazer, because even walking over here for this, I was like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing? What are they expecting me to say? What are they hoping to get out of this? Like, I don't know. And so what gave me the confidence is, I think it goes back to our Marriott School values, was faith in Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I'm a disciple. And my focus is I want to do what he wants me to do, because I know he wants what's best for me and my family. And I want what's best for my family. I mean, that's the most important organization and institution to me. And so when I feel uncertain, I have pure faith that he can fill in where I'm lacking. And I can trust on that, and I can rely on that. And I've seen it time and time again. Like the pathway I had, my pathway would, if you went back and said, what would you do differently? I wouldn't do anything differently, but it's not the pathway I thought I would be on.
Yeah.
It's better than I could have planned.
Yeah.
I think that a lot about students. When I see students struggling in their confidence, I actually am excited a little bit, because I know I can help them navigate it, just like others before me helped me navigate it. And it's really exciting to see them. And often when they're struggling academically or something else, it's not related to academic ability. They're intellectually great. It's usually something else is lacking or happening that's taking up bandwidth in their life. I find I actually don't need to strengthen you academically. We need to strengthen your spiritual connection, because you just need confidence in yourself and your identity and your purpose, and then they can work everything else out.
Yeah. So with faith in Christ being one of our Marriott School values, how have you seen that play out? You've touched on it quite a bit in your life, but I'd love to go deeper on that.
Yeah, so another one of our values, I'll just kind of connect with it too, is excellence.
Yeah.
And I think often when we hear excellence, we think, oh, I need to be the very best. I need to be the top. And as I reflect back now, I think, no, excellence just means back when I was scared to death to come here to BYU and walk in front of a class and teach for the first time, and me saying to the director that asked me, look, you'll get my best. I don't know if my best is good enough, but you're going to get my best. And that, to me, that's what excellence is. You're going to get my best, which doesn't mean it's going to be my best at everything at all times. It just means, given my circumstances, given what I'm going through right now, this is the best I can do. And I've seen students, when they do the best they can do, the problem is they associate that with, they want the best of what anybody ever could be. They want the best of everything.
Yeah.
And I just think that's never going to be obtained.
Yeah.
So give me your best within reason of like what you can do, what you have the emotional, mental, academic capabilities right now, and then let me help you and guide you and direct you. And I've seen students overcome so many things, to come from almost wanting to drop a class or leave a class to kind of figuring out, no, I can actually contribute in this class.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, what a testament to like kind of getting in there and, helping from almost like the inside out.
Yeah. And I also think, when I graduate, then my life's going to start. When I start my family, or when I start my career, or when I start, and I was like, actually, you're probably learning the most important things you can learn about yourself in this environment here at the university.
Yeah.
You're under a lot of stress. You're under a lot of obligations, responsibilities. And I just think, take this time to reflect on, how are you doing? Like, how are you responding to this stress? What can you change in your life? What are some of these things you could do? And if you can start to figure that out here, it's only going to get better, because as other responsibilities come in your life, you've already kind of figured out how you manage that, how you take care of yourself spiritually, emotionally, and how you care for others.
Somebody told me like years ago, like higher level, higher problems of like, when you get into, school, which is a higher level, right? You're getting a higher education. Like, you're going to it's not that life is all solved, right? It's that you now have higher level problems. When you get that job, it's a higher level, so you're going to have higher level problems that you have to, work through.
Manage.
And that's where you're going to learn those lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I want students to know, is like, right now, you're going to start to figure out, how do you define excellence? How do you provide respect for others? How are you showing your faith in Christ by acting even amongst uncertainty? How are you moving forward?
Yeah. So how has your definition of faith in Christ changed and evolved over the years?
I used to think maybe I have faith in Christ, and maybe it was almost on Sundays, right? Like I believed it and I felt it and I knew it. And now it's how is my faith in Christ involving everyday conversations, interactions, and how am I trying to be more a disciple of Christ and not just worship him on Sunday, but really try to become a disciple and align with him in all of my interactions.
I love that. Do you have any like other experiences that like have just testified to you about like how important it is to have faith in Christ, especially in a academic space or even in accounting, like when you were like a CPA? And
yeah, I think it's really tricky because sometimes we think if I have enough faith, then everything will work out.
Yeah.
But when everything will eventually work out, that could be a long time. And I don't think we're meant to just, so I think that's going to require action on our part too. So one thing I think maybe that I've really learned maybe more from my kids, I have kids that are really, they love to mountain bike, they race nationally. And as I watch them and do these races, it's amazing. I mean, the year-round training they do, the coaches they have, everything they do. And then we can go to a race and, my son is favored to be like in one of the top finishers and he gets mechanical on the very first lap. And that's it. The race is over. Like we've trained all year and now that race is over. And part of me looks at that and I've learned from them that you can do everything in your power to be ready. He's going to train, he's going to eat right, he's going to get sleep, but there are still some things that are outside of his control. And rather than be frustrated and upset and mad about that, he recognizes that was out of my control. So I think learning what's within your control and work towards it. You can't just hope, I hope something happens. You've got to do the things that are in your control. You've got to prepare for them and you've got to do it. But you also have to recognize that doesn't mean everything's going to turn out the way I want it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the faith in Christ comes, that he's going to put in my control things I can do and I'm going to work to do it. Yeah. And then I know there's things that are outside my control, and that's when my faith becomes even greater.
I love that. Make yourself deserving of it, even if you don't get it, right? That feeling needs to come from you.
Yeah.
I'd put in the work, even if the outcome wasn't what I wanted. What are some moments that you've been particularly proud of throughout your life and career?
I feel success when my students feel success. Like when I think about the classroom, we've really tracked trying to figure out which students are struggling in the class and why is it and what are those barriers and what can we do to fix that. What's within my power and my control that I can do to help first see that and then alleviate it. I think, I always tell the students, I think I'm known for being pretty good at taking complicated things and simplify them. But I always tell students it's because I wasn't the smartest. If you're really smart, you don't even know there are 5 steps to get from here to here. And I said, but it was through my struggles and through my challenges that I think I'm able to be oh, look, I can't skip a step and kind of help each person along the way. So I think I feel successful that I'm able to take some complicated things and break them down to students to kind of help them.
Yeah. So with that and obviously, BYU, it's everyone feels like we're all competing against each other sometimes and vying for those, especially at the Marriott School, vying for those spots in the program. What advice do you have to students here at the Marriott School when we're all kind of fighting for those limited openings?
Those are real thoughts. And that's one that everybody sees, right? That's outward, but I'd say there's probably 1 million of those little inward every day that you're feeling. Should I raise my hand in class? Should I talk to somebody about the exam? Because we're worried about how we fit in and where we fit with all of it. But I would say from my experience, the other thing I see is students shy away from things well, I think that's going to be too hard, or I think they're already going to opt out before they even had an opportunity. And so I think with my experience now, my advice would be go for what you want. And if you don't get it, that's okay. It's not going to be because you didn't try. And if you don't get it, that's okay because there are other opportunities. I think sometimes I have to take students down. Okay, well, let's say you do all this. None of that's a waste. It's all for your growth and development. And now let's say you get here and you did it all to be accepted into the accounting program, and now you aren't accepted. Well, what's plan B? And then we walk through plan B and plan C, and then sometimes plan B or C is even better than plan A, but we never allow ourselves to think about the what ifs. And so I think don't shy away, go for it, but also that's not the end of the path. That just means there's other opportunities.
How do you define success? How do you measure it?
So that's a loaded question for an accountant. Because in accounting, we quantify everything, right? It's all about measuring and communicating.
Yeah.
But even with all my quantitative background and ratios and ways we look at profitability and success of maybe a company, I would say there is no quantitative way to calculate this.
Yeah.
For me, success comes in quiet reflections. And so each week we have the opportunity as we partake of the sacrament to reflect. And that's my time that, I used to maybe just worship, but now I actually use that as a moment of reflection to be like, where am I at and what I'm doing? What could I have done better this week? Where am I needed this next week? And I know we want everything to be balanced. We always talk about a work-life balance. That is not all 4 quadrants are split evenly. Where am I needed most this week? In which role? As a spouse, as a mother, as a faculty member, as a colleague, as a neighbor, as a minister. It's this opportunity. So for me, success comes in peace and reflection. Reflection over how I'm doing, what I'm doing, and what I can change, and just kind of that peace. There's always tension. There's always tension in I should be doing more, I should do this, but I think there's beauty in that tension. And so I think it's that reflection that helps you untangle it a little bit.
Thank you for listening to the Measuring Success Right podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss the next interview. The Measuring Success Right podcast is a production of the Marriott Student Review. This episode was produced by Stuart Bird, Allison Pope, Sarah Bird, Taia Hobson, and Jackson Berthold. Sound design and audio engineering by James Call. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not reflect the official views or opinions of Brigham Young University or The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.